Adding this in the front, if you're driving or just listening, there is some video footage I show from a handheld camera, and you don't really need to see this. I think you'll be fine if you can't see this video. And the audio here stinks, guys, but this section isn't very long. Thanks. Hey guys, it's Matt. In this video, I want to talk about this period in history. Look at these dates: December 26, 1918 to January 3rd, 2010. Could this be the most perfect time to live through history? Now, what is this? A relative, a pretty distant relative, the mother of my uncle, but my aunt is in my family. My uncle married in, so I guess you would call her my great aunt. I found this. I didn't know I still had this. We went to her funeral on January 8th, 2010, and she lived, I believe, to 90. I didn't do the exact math, but she was very old. The point is, when she died, the family gave me this table and chairs of hers. I found this, and I was looking at it closely. I was going to redact the name, but I don't know. I would think that the dead want to be remembered. I mean, why redact the name? That's not my last name. That's my uncle who married into my family's last name. But I wanted to, I was sitting here in this chair here, just pondering what somebody that lived through those dates would have gone through compared to what we're going through, if you see what I mean. And I'll stop, filming in a moment and go back to the Mac and finish. Just show you, Verizon keeps, just some quick things, guys. Verizon keeps sending me notices that the service for this phone will end. I mean, they don't even support it outside on the street as of December 31st. So I don't know how old it is. It's probably 12 or 13 years old, but I guess I'm going to have to get... All I have is smartphones today. I guess to get the jitterbug for old people, I don't know. I'm getting old myself. Even Matt, you're young anymore. Maybe you deserve the jitterbug, maybe. And then I've been still going through Pam's CDs here, which is taking forever. The Harry Connick Jr. that starts out song 1 with him talking as the devil. That's always nice. But they are dropping. It's getting empty in here. I mean, there's some that are just so bad, I'm throwing them out. Like PM Dawn, the second PM Dawn album. I went through it. The songs were so bad, I threw it out immediately. But I am saving the lyrics just to go over. I mean, it says PM Dawn, the Bliss album, and it says vibrations of love and anger, and I can't read it through the camera, and the ponderance of life and existence. So I might as well take a look at the lyrics, and you flip it over, it's like, oh no, look at this. Could you make the lyrics any more difficult to go through? And when you get to the end here, you've got to go over all the way here. Oh, gosh. Anyway, and then there's some, these people always have to share their pearls. There's something written here that I'm going to go over. But, I saved this. The music itself in the CD, I threw out immediately. It was just horrible. If you're over 45, you may remember PM Dawn. In a few songs, they just take the underlying song from somebody else, and he just raps over it, but it's not a rap, it's just he talks. It's weird. I don't know. PM Dawn had their 15 minutes of fame and probably deserved to be forgot about, but I'm going to go over some of these lyrics. Guys, one more thing. The Ally McBeal CD has not been thrown out yet. It will be thrown out very soon. Songs from the hit show featuring Vonda Shepard. Not good. I don't know why it's still there. I think I was thinking maybe Pam might actually want that one for some reason. But I go through the jackets, of course. Okay, oh yeah, I remember the show. Ally McBeal, of course, was not for me. Probably mid-90s, I don't know. I go through the jackets. So there's, little still shots from the show. Yeah, I remember the show. And then I go, oh no, what's this? The 33 on the back. And guys, whatever creepy thing stands behind the screen, it always has to announce itself, doesn't it? Like, in this day and age, we can actually forget about it. We can actually forget about it. It always has to announce itself. I would say, I don't know, 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 of these jackets that I've gone through. Like here's the George Michael Listen Without Prejudice. Need to go through this jacket. 1 out of 3 or 4 have some kind of creepy announcement from the system saying, I'm here. Don't forget about me. Well, I don't see how we can forget about whatever creepy thing animates the screen at this point. But it has to do it here. There it is. Channel 33 on the back alley McBeal. It has to do it with the constant, which is like the symbolism CD. Freudian slip. Symbolism CD. What? Symbolism video that I made where it's constantly has to announce itself in the same types of ways. Like anybody in this day and age can actually forget about it. But, all right, guys, I'm going to go back to the Mac and finish this one.
Oh, no. I'm on the new Mac and I forgot to pull the plug. Son of a bitch. Hours spent in support forums to see the interaction or problems between a Samsung microphone and an iMac of 2020. All this back and forth, all this research. It took me about a month. You just pull the plug out the back of the microphone and stuff it right back in 1 second later, and it fixes itself. And I have said this before, but it is a good reminder, guys. Pull the plugs. That is absolutely the first place to start. Or like reboot. My neighbor once called me over. I cannot figure out. He's like, I can't get online. I've tried everything. And you just go to the back. Like you're not plugged in. You're not phone's line's not plugged in or whatever it was way back when. So when I first saw the dates of when Helen was born, we just called her Helen, and when she died, immediately popped in my head, and I thought, because I've thought about things like this many times in the past, could this be the best time throughout all of human existence to be alive in our era, in our section of the 26,000-year procession? If there was some time in the past, like you guys are all into, called Lemuria, and people here are expert on Lemuria and Atlantis, times in the past where you just frolicked around on the beach like the Blue Lagoon looking for lube, and that was the best. Maybe there was a golden age. I'm not talking about that. I don't know. For our era, for our Iron Age hell, maybe it could be, but then I thought, each era kind of has its trials, and the softer era would be the era my dad was born into, or the guy I used to go out to lunch with, Fred. The very early 1940s, towards the end of World War II, through now, and my father's still alive. Yes, you'd say he's putting up with all the Mark Zuckerberg stuff and from 2005 through this hellish society that's being created now. But he's like McDonald's loving it. He's going along with it. He's in love with tech. He's like, Matt, this Amazon is incredible. We order this stuff and it just shows up. He loves it. So, let's just say from our perspective, you don't want to be too far into this Terminator, Skynet, hell, Zuckerberg hell that's been created since 2005. So from our perspective, Helen's dates could be the best times to be alive, but not without every era at least has its trials. And whatever the cause of it was, not the purpose here to stray into that. We all know it may have been the V, it may have been the whatever. Let's just leave that aside. Whatever the cause of it was, Helen was born right in the middle, basically the worst possible time in the middle of the Spanish flu. Wherever it came from, whatever the cause. My great-grandfather died of it. My grandfather then was put in basically Girard College for boys, was taken in basically as an orphan. I get his mother was still alive. I have never asked about that. Maybe she just couldn't afford to keep him. I don't know. But he went into Girard College basically like an orphan would, because of my great-grandfather dying right smack in the middle of this thing. So the Helens family wouldn't have known, quote, my family at the time. But, here's a baby born right, she's not aware of what's going on, but the family, having a baby right smack in the middle of this thing, that is certainly at least a trial right off the bat. And another, quote, medical trial for Helen as a young girl, it would be about 10 years before penicillin would be discovered. And I know, there's a hardcore pipe hitting element inside the truth community that the medical community, it's 100% evil. It's never done anything good for anybody's. Nobody's life has ever been saved. There's never been a Doc Graham that's ever tried to help anybody. They're all evil. No, penicillin or hybrids, amoxicillin, doxycycline, antibiotics in general, it probably saved about 500 million people minimum since it was invented. So, infant mortality deaths, there's that 10-year period where there was no penicillin, and even an infection, a cut, could end up taking off a limb. That it was a different era. This is, you could probably point to penicillin as one of the major positive breakthroughs for quality of life, humanity. Maybe they are. Maybe the creeps are still kicking themselves. The guys still got to serve them on plates and dishes with Jared, because like this is the guy's family that brought penicillin to the people and actually improved their lives. And maybe he's still paying for it. Maybe the creeps don't like it, but it was, I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know how anybody could say that was wrong or evil or something, but there's probably an element of the truth community that'll probably say that there's some sort of nefarious conspiracy associated, even with something as simple as penicillin, but I'm not going to go there. Again, we're talking about the best possible time if you live to be 80 to 90 years old, the best possible time to be alive, making the case that Helen's exact years could be that best possible time. I'll look at your comments. But basically, the only other major trial for Helen, someone her age, would be World War II. Again, I'm not doing a sidebar, okay? We're not going to get into that. If you were 18 or 19 years old as Hitler started to invade Poland and Czechoslovakia, and you hear the rumors about Hitler's war machine, I'm sure they cranked out the propaganda on both sides, and years leading up to it, it was scary, I'm sure. It would be an incredibly scary thing, okay? Don't say you wouldn't have been scared by it, or I wouldn't have been scared by it. We would have been scared by it. So no matter what it is or how they played both sides, it's not the point here. If you're Helen, 18, 19 years old, it is an incredible, scary time and an absolute trial that somebody would have to live through. She had no threat of being drafted, and it's not the same at all as would have been for a young man. But nevertheless, I mean, the talk of all of Europe going down, and then who knows what's next. A very scary time. But once you get by this, what a relative to other times in history. What a great period to be alive. Helen's bookends. Let's start all the positives off for Helen's time period by going to our era and working backwards, at least for now. I'll probably jump back to the radio era in just a second. But okay, she died in 2010, mostly missing the complete technocratic hell, Skynet emergence, AI, weird people acting like zombies, the whole society breaks down, CV, ridiculous presentations on the news, things that don't make sense, fake cake in a lake events up and down, bang events, all this stuff. Now, she would have been a normie, wouldn't have noticed much of it either. But nevertheless, I mean, she basically, this Mark Zuckerberg headset meta hell, it was not running full speed in 2010. Sure, the demonic chicken had just come out of its egg, I guess like the raptor in the first Jurassic Park. You bred Velociraptor? Oh, yeah, Mark Zuckerberg. You bred Velociraptor? You bred Skynet? So she missed it. She missed this. And the world was far different in 2007, 8, 9 than it is now. It is a complete breakdown now. Obviously, we talk about this every day. But she missed this part, and that is a real key bonus in the bookends. This picture isn't of a young Helen sitting in front of the family radio, but this is exactly the era she would have experienced. Getting into all the pretty amazing things. Helen would have experienced the opposite of stalled century. Technology that maybe ultimately would have evolved into Skynet. We're not getting into that. It would have been exciting. It was exciting when one kid in my neighborhood who knows what it was. Was it 82 or something, got Atari 2600. Might have been 1980. It doesn't matter. Atari 2600. It was exciting. It was fun. It would have been incredible as a young person, 10, 15 years old, living right smack in the middle of the golden age of radio. I don't think the technology at this point, it wouldn't have been a bad thing at all. Families gathering around the radio, sure, the Ministry of Information was still acting, of course, in my opinion, as the single source of news and all of that, the propaganda. I'm talking about the family experience of gathering around listening to the $64 question or whatever it might have been, something like the Abbott and Costello show, or in A Christmas Story, the little Orphan Annie show, or there were Amos and Andy. Okay, so we're not getting into that. All the shows, the family kind of came together, and in many ways it was a good thing. Again, I'm not going to say again the hardcore segment of the truth community that Matt's pushing technology. He should know better. It became Skynet. I know. Let it alone. That's not the point here. Do you know how incredible it would have been as a 21-year-old hearing rumors of this movie called The Wizard of Oz, and then getting together with 3 or 4 of your best friends and going to see it when you've had basically just black and white, and the moment when it switches over to color, it's good now. I watched The Wizard of Oz on that giant electricity outage. I pulled out the old classics on the old 13-inch TV with the VCR built in the bottom. I watched the old classics in that situation. It was good now. Could you imagine being a 20-year-old in 1939 at that moment? I mean, incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then all the other milestones, against the opposite of stalled century. Not just with the great movies, I guess Casablanca was a few years before this, but then a full-color Gone with the Wind and everything that would be coming in the future. And it was a big deal to go out to the movies. It was fun. The popcorn was only, was the equivalent of, it was probably like for us, $1.50. It wasn't that, I'm sure, again, of course, back then it would have been 20 cents or 10 cents or something, but it wasn't exorbitant, and it wasn't just every part of the society started to stink and rot. The way they do business, things start good. The first 3 Star Wars started very good. There's Wizard of Oz, even if you're anti-movie, incredible spiritual messages at the highest level. This is not evil at all, this movie. Tells you all about yourself. So, again, this time period starts for someone like Helen that is just the absolute opposite of stalled century. Every time you turn around, music is changing. This thing, Bill Haley and the Comets, something called rock and roll. Could you imagine compared to the stalled hell that we live through now? Then, if you're Helen in your mid-20s, you hear about something that people are putting in their homes called a television, with movies and shows right in your home. And then in the late 40s, one person in the neighborhood would have had a TV. And I hear stories, my dad and my uncle always tell stories. They lived on Harmony Lane in Glenside, which is by Abington, just above North Philadelphia. Who had the first TV? My grandmother's, he called him Uncle John, my grandmother's brother, Uncle John, who actually became sort of a TV repairman with the giant tubes in the back. But by 1954 or 1955, there were most households that had a TV. And again, things start off very good. I was thrilled as a kid to be looking forward to shows like The A-Team and The Greatest American Hero. And it wasn't an evil thing. And nobody could have predicted that it would become, the internet and Skynet. So we're going to leave that alone. Families gathering around, watching Dragnet, Bonanza, The Honeymooners, families coming together. It would have been an incredible experience, if you're being honest. An incredible experience. Somebody's trying to rise up. Matt, I love Lucy. That's Lucifer. Yeah, I know. I know. This isn't my first conspiracy broadcast. Let it go. I know it's Lucifer. Nobody knew that the Game Boy that some kid in Kingswood Apartments had, he pulled out some Game Boy in the 80s, would turn into Skynet. We didn't know. it would still would have been an incredible time to be alive, to experience all of this. So it's not just about movies and media. There would have been a ton of beneficial technologies for somebody that lived in the years that Helen lived. Right about the late 50s, very late 50s, you start hearing stories of a cross-country flight, New York to LA nonstop, and then New York to Paris, opening up travel to Europe. And sure, you could get out to LA before that. I mean, it was like mostly what's depicted in Leonardo DiCaprio, Howard Hughes, The Aviator. Like, call Noah Dietrich, have him start buying. Just like that, Howard? Yeah, I got a tiger by the tail here. Whatever's, he says, what does he say? He says, we need to be above the weather. It would have been a nightmare trying to get out to see Aunt Ginny in 1951. You're like, you got to fly from New York to Oklahoma City and stop over for like 28 hours, and then up over here, and then Denver, and then it just these flying below the weather, and you're rocked around from the turbulence. It would have been a nightmare. And then cross-country or transatlantic flights, what does that open up? It would have been incredible. And older people talk about this golden age of flying when they flew, say, 1965 to 1980. It was a big deal. It was fun. It was special. People got dressed up. If you're under age 35, you don't know what the F I'm talking about. You would get dressed up to go to the airport. I kind of remember this as a kid a little bit. But if you're older than 50, you remember going to the airport and the way you were treated on the plane and the food. It was just as interesting to get there as it was getting there. And anybody age 35 would think I'm absolutely out of my friggin' mind. And I don't know of too many movies that depicts this golden age of flying like I'm describing. So the one that you get a tiny sense of what it was is Catch Me If You Can. Pan Am, the days of Pan Am and TWA. I guess this is supposed to be late 70s or something like that. You get a sense. Now, I don't remember seeing no pilot with 4 or 5 beautiful, they're called stewardesses. They were called stewardesses at the time, walking through the airport like this. And it's a little over the top. But, it was a prestige. Even a flight attendant Pan Am was a prestigious job. It was the way you were treated. You get little. I remember as a kid they would give you like little pins and little toys and things like that. When you little flying pins and things. It was a big deal. It was a big deal. Just trust me on this. Now you don't even want to be in first class. The couple times I was boofed up to first class for the insurance company in the 90s, used to fly back and all around 10 states, so I built up a lot of miles. And sometimes it'd be like some disgruntled, older flight attendant who does the first class, and you're like, I was in my 20s. I want to be back with the cute girls who were in the back. I'm like, I don't want to be up here with this sea hag. And then she's got some. See, then it went to tenure. And then the older flight attendants, the ones that act like sea hags, they would get their pick of where they wanted to work. So they want to work first class because it's easier. And it's like, I don't want to be up here with this sea hag. And then she knows she can't be fired because of all that stuff started to happen. So you just be kind of like, Miss, can I have another Diet Coke? Sit down and shut up. Don't you see the seatbelt sign is on? It just totally changed as society became adulterated and corrupted. We've talked about how Not Milk reality seems to carry forth a repeating theme of putting out something that's good or mostly pure, if not 51 to 49, mostly good, and then it seems to work to corrupt it over time. But a little bit different spin on that theory. I guess in talking about it in the past, it was kind of assumed Not Milk reality put it out to begin with. It probably needs real spiritual beings like us with real creative imaginations to put it out initially. So the source of certain technologies or the source of the original 3 Star Wars or whatever George Lucas maybe became corrupted. But in many cases, I'm starting to think the source of it is initially good because the not milk or the dark part of reality probably is incapable of producing it in the first place. It's a corrupter. So then it might even fund a project or fund a certain technology. But the technology or the invention or whatever probably comes from somebody that's trying their best or comes from a real person. And then once it's out into reality itself, then that's when the not milk can grab it, can put its slimy appendages all over it and work to corrupt it. So that's a little bit different take on what we've talked about in the past, how things start good and then end up being completely corrupting, and ultimately it will move every single technology and every single thing that was good into something. If human beings still use it and embrace it, it'll turn into something that corrupts the human or hides the human or completely disguises the human from what they really are, understanding their true nature. So, does that mean Matt George Lucas initially was a relatively good guy or a real spiritual person, a real creative being, not an NPC? Probably. To be able to put the first three movies out that overall carry a very positive message, probably. And then, just looking at the standard case with George Lucas of Tony Hawk corruption, probably. I paused for a few minutes to really think about this, and the original three Star Wars, or just the original 1 and 2, or Empire Strikes Back is 2, the way I'm positing it. I don't care about they started to mix the numbers up. The 3 is actually 6, and I forget all that. To me, the first 3 are the ones I grew up with in the 70s that were incredible. Helen's experience going to see Wizard of Oz was my experience in 1977, going to see the original Star Wars. It was absolutely incredible, the likes of which anybody under age 40 can't possibly imagine how amazing it was when that ship came over your head. I mean, we'll talk about that some other time. But it brings me to the message was so good, and the message was not dark, that I would say, I'm thinking about this, George Lucas would had to be, started out on the right path. Maybe Tony Hawk started out on the right path. They're not all born from a George Soros egg. There's some people we get the sense they're always like the velociraptor coming out of the egg. They're always that way. Like, oh, this one's really dark. Put them in the special part of the orphanage. You just get the sense that creepy vibe. You don't get that with George Soros. Somebody that too many Eyes Wide Shut parties, too many times under the dragon's wing, too many times whacked off under the dragon's wing, whatever it may be, you get in bed too far. And, these pictures where he did this deal with Disney, I don't remember seeing, have I looked through all of them? Have I looked through the entire Kim Jong-un photo album? No, but that I actually have, and that we'll revisit that sometime on Free Boys. That the Kim Jong-un photo album is funny as shit. Oh my gosh, they're the most staged pictures of all time. But he doesn't seem happy in any of these pictures. And, he's mad. Everything is a presentation. Everything's by design. I hear you. But I could talk about this subject for hours. I love this subject. 4.1 billion? Come on. What a joke. 4.1 billion. Any third grader would have valued Star Wars at 20 to 25 billion. Matt Disney could have afforded that. Oh yeah, they could have. Okay, they could have afforded that. I mean, Pfizer was trying to do the AstraZeneca deal 4 or 5 years ago, and it was like 60 or 70 billion. I mean, come on, Star Wars, and all you could do with it. Yeah, they destroyed it. They made it so, the kids' lemonade stand soon will outdo what Star Wars does in a year, because they destroyed every bit of it. They'll wring that washcloth out for many years. But if you did it right, it would be, of course, over a 50-year period, Star Wars would be worth well over many trillions of dollars if it was done right. It was corrupted on purpose. We'll talk about that some other time. But the point is, the original deal, 4.1 billion of cash and stock. I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's almost, the amount is so low. If anybody thinks that's a lot, it's not for Star Wars. The amount is so low. But what is it? That loser Mark Cuban sold his company for like $3 billion. Some no-name company that did something online with radio stations. $3 billion, but he gets 4. 4 for Star Wars. And if somebody's screaming at me, throwing rubber duckies, that was during the .com era, Matt, and they just overpaid for everything. Okay. Obviously, there's something going on. We'll talk about it some other time with George Lucas. Is this his humiliation ritual? It is to some degree. every third grader knows that Disney should have paid 10 to 15 to 20 billion for Star Wars. And this is saying basically maybe it's a message that, you come in bed with us and you do play our game, George, and whatever. Then you try to get out of line, this and that, and then humiliation of your whole life's work only getting a pittance. And these insiders know how much more it's worth. So it is like a humiliation ritual. And these pictures where he's shaking hands with Bob Iger, getting his 4 billion, and it is a humiliation because he should have got 20 billion more. It reminds me of that scene in Goodfellas where that guy that owned the restaurant asked Paulie to take half the restaurant because Tommy was being such a Joe Pesci character, was out of control in his restaurant. He needed Paulie to come in and take half of it because of Tommy, the Joe Pesci character. It's like he knew the guy that was giving his restaurant away to Paulie. He just knew. He just sensed deep down it wasn't going to go good. They milked it for all they could, and they ended up burning it down. And that's kind of looks like George Lucas here as the Goodfellas restaurateur, and Paulie as Bob Iger. And it's a good parallel because in the movie Goodfellas, they milked the restaurant. They used up all the guy's credit. All the liquor that came in, they stole out the back and end up selling it for 50 cents on the dollar. And then eventually the guy went bankrupt, and then for the insurance, they put a match to it. It looks the same thing. It's like a foreshadowing or predictive programming in Goodfellas about what Disney is doing to Star Wars on purpose. You had the last 3 movies that were all made bad on purpose. Any third grade Dungeons and Dragons club could do better. Then you had The Mandalorian. And to me, The Mandalorian was praised because the past 3 movies were so bad. The standard, I never watched more than a few minutes of The Mandalorian. I don't care. A guy in a helmet that you don't identify with, a little Yoda baby. I mean, how much are you going to milk? There's people here that even like The Mandalorian in these, that are with us here at this channel. I think it's only looking good because of how bad everything else is. And then you had something that was even really bad, unquestionably horrible, the book of Boba Fett. So Disney's doing the same thing that Paulie did to the restaurant, milking it, burning it down. Now, there's still people even in this community that believe that Disney's just doing it for the money and it's all being destroyed on purpose. If it was about shareholder value and maximizing value in return, first of all, you'd make the series better, but you would be protecting the brand name, which you could milk if you did it properly for the next 100 years. It's only been how long since they took over, the rat took over from George Lucas, and they've basically already destroyed it. Strayed a little bit off the original topic, so I got to bring it back. Forgot one of the major trials, if you lived over the years in which Helen lived, was the Great Depression. And again, guys, I'll look to your comments. Pick an 80-year lifespan and what would be the best years to live. And I'm going to wrap this video up. There's so much more we could do on this. Seems like we want to romanticize the 1800s or the 1700s, but I'll tell you what, the average lifespan probably was in certain areas 45, and no penicillin and infant mortality, 1 out of 3 or 4 babies. And I mean, it was tough. Life was tough, man. I mean, it wasn't, you watch The Patriot with Mel Gibson, and it wasn't, it all looks rosy in these movies, but it wasn't, man. Life was tough. No plumbing, electricity, running water. So be careful if you're going to pick the old era for the 80 years you would choose to live. But we'll I got to wrap this up. We'll talk about that some other time. I didn't talk about the Great Depression, and I haven't researched this, at length. I mean, I've looked at it, overall. I mean, 15 hours over the years for different reasons, all the different types of research I've done in looking into different things, but I've never done more than that. And also, again, it's one of these things like, what does the research, where's it going to lead me? What's Google going to tell me reality was? I really wish I had asked my grandmother, both grandmothers, and my grandfather. I didn't know my other grandfather. I wish I'd asked them more about this time. If I had to give my opinion on it, it was real hardship for a lot of people, but a bit overblown, the history, in my opinion. So the history tells us it was a 10 out of 10 in terms of severity, job loss, movies and television shows showing us people could not get their next meal. And a lot of people suffered, no doubt. But I think the history, in my opinion, the history is a bit overblown. I don't think many people held stocks back then. Okay, maybe certain parts of New York or Chicago and big cities. Most of the country was on the farm. I mean, would they have felt it at all? No. So, okay, it was real. It was tough. Of course, the whole situation was not milk cooked up, in my opinion. It didn't just happen naturally. That always it's all part of the script, in my opinion. And what gives that away actually is how quick the New Deal. Where'd the New Deal money come from? All the infrastructure projects started, all part of a script. And the infrastructure projects in Germany started at the same time after Weimar to create the infrastructure that Adolf Hitler would need for his war machine. What a coincidence. New Deal infrastructure happens basically the same time as German infrastructure projects, like the Autobahns and things like that. Coincidence? No. But that's for another time. I think they cooked it up. Of course, they laid their slimy hands on the financial markets and pulled their levers, and a lot of people suffered, but I just don't think it was as bad as the history says it was. I'd say 7 or 8 out of 10, not a 10 out of 10. Now, what are you basing that, Matt, on? That's ignorant. I don't know. I've been alive over 50 years. I've looked at a lot of different things in a lot of different angles with a different set of eyes. That's what it's based on. All right, so this would have been a trial. We forgot this trial for Helen. We're living through that exact time period to 2010. You would have gone, or the family would have gone through this. So that is another trial. If you believe that like the years Helen lived would be the best time to live. And I wanted to, of course, mention this. Cannot go without this one. But it seems to be the easier time was my father's years. Let's say 42 or 43, and he's still alive. So I don't need to search for the other bookend. He's still alive. Think of my father's era and like what did they have to go through? Basically nothing. Was worried about the Vietnam War, hearing the talk of draft, but then was a school teacher, or it was his senior year of Bloomsburg trying to become a school teacher. Oh, school teachers have no chance of being drafted. So what trials? Like none, basically. Born after the Great Depression, right after World War II, the Iraq War. I mean, nothing, that era, nothing. And if anybody's rising up throwing rubber duckies, well, what about you, Matt, in 1970 through now? What trials? A lot, if you have the eyes to see. A lot. If you see what we can see, since mostly a correlation with the invention of the internet, you've seen a complete breakdown of reality and standards of normal, not even understanding what a man and a woman is. You could have said that to somebody in 1960 or 70. There will be a point where people go back and forth. They would have thought you're crazy. They would have said no matter how open-minded they were, they'd have said reality is never going to get to that. That will just never happen. So that's what's happened to us. We've gone, even once we started to open our eyes to how the world really works, if somebody would have come to me in 2008 or 2009 and said, this is what the world's going to look like in 2022 with what we just went through the last 2 years and literally, we've talked about it, I guess. Reality itself has broken down for me personally. I would have said in 2008, I would have said, no way. I don't believe it. Now, there's some dark elements in this world, but are they going to be able to go that far? No. So the advantage of like my father's era living then, of course, he's like most normies now. Everything on CNN is completely real. We spoke recently about the Will Smith thing. He's like, what do you think of that? And I don't bring this stuff up with him or with anybody anymore, but if somebody brings it up and asks me, I cannot tell a lie. Of course, I said to him, what do I think about it? It's cake on a lake, man. It's just ridiculous. Who would believe that? Little 5'3", 130 pounds soaking wet, puts his hand behind his back, kind of leans into it. I mean, okay, I don't want to, let's leave it alone. And he said, here's the reaction. Well, the Oscars disagrees with you because they removed or they banned him from 10 years. I went, did he really just say that? The Oscars disagrees? Like the Oscars is going to come out and make a big public statement that we believe what this guy Matt believes, that the event was not, was, it was two actors interacting with each other. Well, of course. And I'm like, well, of course the Oscars doesn't agree with me. If it was a stage show, well, they're going to be involved in that. Don't you see that, Dad? Anyway, so I'm like, this is not going anywhere. But at first, this is what I was going to say. He said, out of the blue, he said, at first I kind of thought what you did. And I went, what? But I think he was saying like, it was like part of the show or something. And then he said, and then it immediately changed, like he took a Mandela effect download. And it was like, Matt's completely out to lunch for believing it possibly could be staged. And what CNN just told me is completely real. But he almost like a little part of him came out and said, I believe what you did at first. And then he was like, the Wetiko part of him was like, we can't go there. And it was like covered up by what CNN tells him to say. But I think what he was saying was, it was like part of the not that, he was part of the act or part of the show of what was being put on, I think is what he was saying. But the point is, if you're born in my father's era, you experienced a lot of, or Helen's era, you experienced a lot of reality before it was completely corrupted, which came, of course, with no coincidence, with the hopefully not, but potential sentience of the internet, whatever the internet is. There's something creepy, dark creature alive in there somewhere. Maybe at one point it put itself into somebody's Commodore 64 in 1984. Hopefully the guy he would have known about it, like Weird Science, they could have pulled the plug on it and thrown it out the window. But there's something creepy about the internet, like it's almost Skynet to me. It's almost alive in some sense. And two things with my father, he doesn't see all the dark things that we see. But if we with the same eyes and perspective were living through the era he did, you're going to be going to college and you're going to look up in the sky and not see big trails. Things were more real because the dark element did not have it slimy, even though we always say they've always been here. Whatever the story of the Roman Empire was converting itself into the Catholic Church, or these creeps have always been here. But the power or their influence or what they've been able to do did not go exponentially off the charts until our generation, or I'm 50, Generation X. My father experienced things, or Helen would experience things, even though they might have been the first seeds of what turned into something very dark, would have experienced the best parts of it. And in the case of my father, 1942 or 43 to now, almost no trials at all. The best of worlds, and it was the best of times and the worst of times, and it wasn't the opening line of A Tale of Two Cities for somebody born when my father's was. It was basically, compared to all of human history, as far as we know it, it was the best of times, it was the best of times. And now it was almost that for us, somebody age 50, but now the not nilk has gotten out of control since 2001, A Space Odyssey, a job application, and Stay 2 nights, get the third free at the Millennium Hilton. Thanks for listening.